let's talk about love. Yes, love. You may remind me, Anna, you are in Ukraine, you have to talk about war, but you'd be surprised to know that war and love are combinable. You may ask your great-grandparents if you still have this privilege or do read some books about wars. This is the time when people feel the most and they are extremely honest in their emotions. My name is Anna and I vlog daily from Ukraine since the start of the brutal Russian invasion. But in my videos I also want to remind you, Ukraine is not limited to war. Every culture has some central love stories that tell a lot about this country. Let me introduce you to some Ukrainian. Ukraine is a big country with a long history, so it was quite difficult for me to choose 3 love stories that are worth your attention. There are many more, and let me know in the comments below would you like to hear some of them too. But let's start with the ancient times and return back to the history of Kyiv, Rus. On our channel in Discover Ukraine we have a video about Kyiv Princess Olha. She was famous for her diplomatic talents and also for the revenge. In ancient chronicles, they did not write much about love affairs of their rulers. What we know is that Olha and Ihor were married, they had children together, loved and respected each other. But what makes me believe that Olha did love her prince is the fact how she actually took a revenge after he was killed by opponents. Once, her husband, Ihor, who was the Prince of Kyiv, collected taxes. And he decided to visit the lands of Drevlyans twice, which was not very wise, but Drevlyans didn't like that too and killed Ihor in a very torturing manner. Olha decided to take a revenge, and the way she did it is still remembered by every Ukrainian. The morale and relationships were very unusual in Middle Ages, so these very Drevlyans who killed the Prince of Kyiv later decided to visit Olha and offer her a marriage with their prince. And they sent 3 delegations. Each did not survive the visit. The first delegation was buried alive, the third delegation was set on fire, and the third delegation drunk to death. Later, Olha came by herself to the land of Drevlyans asking for a very weird tax. She asked all the houses to give her birds, like sparrows and swallows, and later the army of Olha attached clothes to these birds, set on fire, and birds returned to the houses, destroying by fire all of the Iskorosteń, the capital of Drevlyans. I think that such a revenge proves, number 1, Olha did love her husband, and number 2, you never mess up with Ukrainian women. Later she ruled Kyiv for decades and was very successful on the diplomatic field. Once she visited Byzantium, and the emperor of a very strong, if not the strongest, empire of that time wanted to marry her. But she didn't. She did not want to lose the control of Kyiv, and she made a very interesting plan. She was not Christian at the moment, asked the emperor to baptize her and be her godfather, and when he repeated his proposal, she said, "Well, a daughter cannot marry her father." Please be attentive. From all that we know about Olha, the main feature, she was smart. And now we will jump into the 16th century. Because this is the century when one of the greatest love stories in Ukraine and in Ottoman Empire developed. And if you'd ask me as an ordinary Ukrainian, I would say perhaps this is the most famous and the most known love story all over Ukraine. The love story of Roxolana and Suleiman the Great, or the Magnificent, the greatest and strongest Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. In the 16th century, Ukraine suffered greatly from Tatar raids. They were stealing Ukrainian people and selling them as slaves. Not only Ukrainian, that was a problem for many Eastern European lands. And Tatar hordes reached even the Carpathian Mountains. In Ivano-Frankivsk, modern Ivano-Frankivsk region, there is a town, Rohatin, and the future wife of the greatest sultan of its time was born there into the family of the Orthodox priest. It is unbelievable how a woman from a small Ukrainian town managed to go through so many challenges in her life, being sold on a slave market, and turn into one of the most influential women of the Ottoman Empire, and also the inspirer of the so-known Sultanate of Women, a very brief period in the Ottoman Empire when sultans actually advised and discussed political issues with their wives and mothers. Lots of modern Ukrainian or Turkish series love to concentrate on the romantic side of this story. But historians and even Wikipedia can tell us a lot about the character and strong will of Roxolana, also known as Sultan Hurrem. She was a slave. The Sultan fell in love with her and made her a legal wife, which was already almost impossible. But not just a legal wife, but the only wife, and she was his advisor. There are lots of records that demonstrate how she helped him in various military campaigns. She exchanged letters with the Polish king Sigismund II August and actually stopped many of Ottoman raids to Ukraine and Poland. She was a great diplomat, started a number of social projects, and most importantly, broke another old tradition of Ottomans. She moved in with Sultan and lived with him until her death. And once again, looking at this very unusual, almost unrealistic but still historical love story, we see that the main feature that history remembers about Roxolana is that she was very smart. And now we will travel to the 18th century. And I'm happy to introduce you to one of my favorite Ukrainians, Hetman Ivan Mazepa, a great political, cultural leader, philosopher, diplomat, and a very bright personality. What is more important and more persuasive, Mazepa is still hated in Russia because of his independent thoughts and ability to develop Ukraine. Moscow Church even laid anathema on him, but Mazepa was extremely religious, built dozens of beautiful churches all over Ukraine, known now as Mazepa's Baroque style. This anathema is still active, same as the symbolism Mazepa has. Until now, anti-Russian pro-European people can be called in Ruski Mir media Mazepists. I think that's a compliment. Let me know in the comments below, would you like to have a separate video on Hetman Mazepa? It would be a pleasure to film it. But now let's concentrate on the romantic side of his life that is quite mysterious. He was very educated and spent a lot of time in Europe. He spoke 7 languages and worked at the court of the Polish king in the 17th century. Lord Byron has a poem about Mazepa, entitled Mazepa, and that is a very famous and at the same time provocative poem, inspired by the history described by another famous writer, Voltaire. It doesn't seem very real, but who knows? So, both the poem and Voltaire's story describe early years, youth of Mazepa when he served at the court of the Polish king. And he had an affair with the wife of the really old Polish count. And when the affair became known, Mazepa was sent away from the court, but that was not the end for his troubles. He was caught and tied naked to the horse, and that the horse was set loose. And Lord Byron's poem describes this experience of young Mazepa and how he actually managed to survive such a problematic adventure. And this image of a handsome, naked young man traveling the steppes of Ukraine that later became the Hetman of the successful European country became extremely popular. You may read it, by the way. Inside Ukraine, analyzing Mazepa's letters, his lifestyle, this story does not seem likely, though it's fun. And his real love story was much more sad. When he was already 65, he fell in love with his goddaughter, who was 16. That was actually the first time he met her when she was adult, and she also fell in love with him. But her parents did not support the idea of this marriage. You know that I always invite you to Ukraine after we win. And one of the cities I greatly advise you to visit is Byron. That was the capital of Mazepa, a place where Tsar Peter committed one of the first genocides against Ukraine, but also a place where my grandmother was born. And in the museum in Byron, I personally read letters that Mazepa exchanged with Motria, his loved one. And they are filled with emotions and respect. Just look at this example. After her parents refused their marriage, they decided to send Motria to the monastery for a certain period of time. She escaped on the way to the monastery and ran to Mazepa's mansion. When he learned she is there, he asked her to leave, because if he would return home, find her there, it would be really difficult for him to withstand that temptation. And he did not want to break the rules and asked the love of his life to leave the house. This romantic story is quite sad. Motria continued to live in the monastery because she did not want anyone else but Mazepa, and he didn't survive long, especially after the destruction of Byron by Tsar Peter. Russia loves spoiling our lives, be it in the 18th, 19th, 20th or 21st century. But we will win, and I hope that this time forever. During this war in Ukraine, there are many marriages and love stories which promise our history is just beginning. Remember to subscribe if you're new to the channel. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons. It's an honor to have you in my life. And you know I love you. Slava Ukraini!